stand up, lift our seat cushions, dig out our life jackets, put them over our head, tie up the chin strap and the waist strap, wait for instructions. We've got a life ring at the front, there's life rings at the back, there's exit gates on each side. Flares, first aid kit, fire extinguisher in this console here. We also have a two-way radio, boat hook, boat paddles, everything we need here. Adios.
Toronto.
Welcome to Winnipeg.
Thank you.
Anybody else visiting? All from Winnipeg? Yeah, Winnipeg.
Winnipeg.
You guys will all back me up on whatever I tell this guy from Toronto?
I'll believe it, don't worry.
Okay.
They're gullible.
Anyway, we're starting on the Assiniboine River here. This is just over 1,000 kilometers long. It begins up near Yorkton, Saskatchewan. Priestville, Saskatchewan, and it comes to an end behind us when it flows into the Red River. We'll go there in a bit. We're so high in the spring. If you look at the train bridge supports, it was up to the rust color there. It cleaned off all that rust color on the train bridge concrete. So for 2 weeks at the beginning, we couldn't go under the Main Street Bridge in front of us. Couldn't fit. We had to stick to the Red River for 2 solid weeks at the end of May, early June. We can fit now, so I'll confidently turn the breeze up ahead. Next. Right hand side, we got colored lines on the concrete here. Got a red line at the top, yellow line in the middle, blue line at the bottom. The blue line with the waves indicates the normal spring melt water level of the river. That's where it rises to when 1,000 kilometers of snow and ice rapidly melts. It's all going to get to the Red River, so up to the blue line it goes, stays here until early. That's normal. This year though, middle of June, couldn't see the blue line, it was underwater. That's not normal at all. The water crested just below the yellow line there. That's like a warning line. Up over the red line is up over the city. Been up there many, many times in history. Big one for the actual city, 1950. A flood that covered 1/3 of Winnipeg and forced 100,000 people to evacuate. That's why the massive Red River floodway was built in the 1960s. It ended up being the second largest earth-moving project in the whole world when it was done in 1968. It was second only to the Panama Canal. And the premier of Manitoba at the time, Duff Robb, when he fought very hard to get it built, it cost $100 million 1960s taxpayer dollars. So, needless to say, the residents of Winnipeg and Manitoba were not convinced at all. Everyone, they voted him out. They voted him out the next election. They complained about it for decades. They called it Duff's Ditch. That's what one of the newspaper headlines called it when it was being built. Everyone thought it was too big and it was a vanity project. But he was still alive in 1997, the flood of the century. That had the floodway full for months. The rivers were inches below the top of the red line, ready to flood. The floodway almost flooded on the east side of the city. And Duff was still here to say, I told you so. And since 97, they say without it in 97, 80% of Winnipeg would have been underwater. Over 500,000 people would have had to evacuate most of the city. And they more than doubled the size of it in the early 2000s. after the flood of '97. That cost $650 million, but it didn't stink so bad when they realized the initial $100 million floodway prevented about $40 billion in damage. So it paid for itself 400 times over. We just learned this year is the 4th largest Winnipeg flood in recorded history this spring. We had more water this year than the 1950 flood that I talked about there. The water didn't even hit the yellow line because it was all absorbed by Duff's ditch. Yeah. Up on the legislative building here, the seat of the Manitoba Legislative Assembly, created in 1919, made from huge amounts of timber stone, which is a limestone that comes from rock quarries an hour north of the city. Still in use today, actually. Big belt of this limestone formed under the massive glacier that used to be that used to cover most of what is now Manitoba. And the fossils throughout the limestone, throughout this building, are Ordovician era fossils. They're 450 million years old. Couple hundred million years before the dinosaurs. The statue at the very top of the dome is the Golden Boy. That statue was put up there in 1919, made in France. It's a bronze statue that was given the gold leaf coating first in the 1950s. By the time I was growing up, to a very tarnished and dull, more of a greenish boy. Thought he was this big my whole life until they pulled him down in 2002, and we learned that he's 5.25 meters to the top of the torch, 17 and a half feet tall. Top of that torch is up there. But more important is the statue at the top of the steps. Louis Riel, the leader of the Red River Resistance and the Métis Nation. Back when this country out east called Canada was pushing their boundaries into the northwest, into the prairies, which had a well-established existing way of life. Riel and the resistance took Upper Fort Garry by force. They set up a provisional government within the fort to slow Canada down and get some negotiating done, some protections for the existing way of life out here. That's what led to the Manitoba Act, July 15th of 1870. And that's what had us joining Canadian Confederation. That's why in this day and age, Riel is widely regarded as the founding father of the province of Manitoba. Let's think more about him on the Red River, but we got to get to it first, so we'll turn the breeze back up and east of the Red River. historic port. Everything on the left side of the boat here, popular spot in this day and age. Back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, it was a very large and busy railway shipping yard. 27 rail lines from across Canada and the US connecting. Here it served as the central transfer hub for the North American railway shipping network at that time. Rail yard that went about a kilometer away from us between Main Street and the Red River in Whitby, lined with dozens and dozens of brick buildings which all crumbled over the last century or so. The few that remain in the port were restored in the 1990s, like the Johnston Terminal building through the trees on the right there. That's from 1930. Behind it, out of sight, is where the Children's Museum is. That's in a building from 1889. And my personal favorite buildings are the Forks Market buildings on either side of the observation tower with the flag there on the left. Because they got all the food choices and the mini donuts, right? And the ice cream. and they're from 1909 and 1910. They were actually horse stable buildings for two rail companies for doing their local deliveries by horse and cart. They had over 100 horses living in each building, but they also had over 100 years to clean up for the health inspectors. So don't sweat it when you're ordering your burgers, fish, and chips. And straight ahead is the confluence of the two rivers. The Assiniboine flows into the Red River right in front of us. The Red River of the north begins in the United States to the right. To the south, at the twin cities of Breckenridge, Minnesota and Wahpeton, North Dakota. It flows approximately 880 kilometers up to Lake Winnipeg. The meeting of the two rivers has a very deep human history going back way further than La Vérendrye arriving in 1732, which I remember from elementary school. The different indigenous nations from across the continent, from all corners of the continent, use the meeting of these two rivers as a central meeting place for these big summit gatherings, going back thousands of years. We have the Udena Circle on the left over the bank. You'll see some curved posts up on these big stone pillars up there. And those posts, they make a perimeter around this big bowl in the earth that was created from an archaeological dig that turned up layers and layers of artifacts. Seashells that only exist in the Gulf of Mexico alongside seashells that only exist on the west coast of Canada. Showing how different indigenous nations came from different parts and brought stuff from where they were from. It all settled into these layers of artifacts. There's repeating layers too over time of the same sorts of artifacts, showing there's regularity to these gatherings. And the oldest artifacts in that particular dig date back 6,000 years, showing at least 6,000 years of continuous indigenous existence on this land here. It's a good 20 times further back before La Vérendrye arrived in 1732. And all the water from both rivers is going to go north. It'll flow through Lake Winnipeg. It'll eventually move down the Nelson River, past the polar bears of northern Manitoba, out Hudson's Bay, to the whole wide world from there. That's where our insect box is. And this is how we walk over to downtown Winnipeg. St. Boniface on the east side of the river is the largest francophone population west of Quebec. It was established in 1818 and it was its own city till 1971. I always encourage a stroll over the pedestrian bridge. You get a much better look at the artwork coming into view now on the upper outer edge of the vehicle bridge in front of us. Big thick band of black granite running the whole length of the bridge, lined with artwork weaving in and out of cultural symbols that go back to the Red River settlement and earlier. It looks pretty cool from the boat, but it looks way better when you're walking on the footbridge beside the bridge. a couple years ago, like the Blackwood, opened like 3 years ago. I think this was all undeveloped downtown riverfront most of my life. It was simply the edge of the boom era, you know, early 1900s brick buildings of early downtown Winnipeg, which are all still there. There's like 30 city blocks straddling Main Street a few blocks away from us. In these belts, the Exchange District closest to the towers of Portage Main, the Theatre District, the Warehouse District ahead of us under lots of construction, Chinatown, on the north. And the residential buildings, there's, you know, half dozen on this side of the dock. There's another half dozen on the other side of the dock in front of us, stretching on out of sight towards Higgins. And all the people living down here on Waterfront Drive has really transformed everything east of Main Street, between Main Street and this river that we're on. It's all thriving now, and there's lots of construction going on. And all those early 1900s buildings are full of quirky little shops and boutiques and bars and restaurants that are all doing quite well. This one on the water beside us, this was an example of a building that was vacant my whole life. Windows filled in with brick, just sitting there empty forever. Back in the day, the way it's built down on the water there, it used to be the pump and screen house for the Amy Street steam plant. It would actually pull water in from the Red River, filter the Red River water, send it up to the steam plant for use. The Amy Street steam plant generated steam heat, delivered it through a number of pipelines from building to building to centrally heat the buildings in downtown Winnipeg. And after decades of vacancy, that little brick building behind us there is it's been a very successful little restaurant, Chibo's Waterfront Cafe, for the last 10 years or so. It opened around the same time as the colorful striped Beer Hotel that was added. This building here is about 10 years old. It has absolutely no cultural or historical significance. That'll be the only question we'll test. The old dock beside us is the old Alexander Dock at the base of Alexander Avenue. Up in the middle of the dock there, past the roadblock, the orange and black roadblocks there. Alexander Avenue is the warehouse district, and this dock was a busy, important commercial shipping dock in the steamboat shipping era. Steamboats used to run nonstop back and forth between here and Minnesota. And if you look up from the middle of the dock, you see all the construction going on there. 2 or 3 city blocks of new buildings. They're fixing up some of the old early brick ones. And you'll see the long reddish-brown construction, or sorry, the long reddish-brown brick cornerstone of the warehouse district, which is the old Eaton's Catalog warehouse building. It goes on for over 2 city blocks down the street there in front of us. And it's a huge building. Eaton's needed the whole thing. I think there's like 50 different companies in it now using individual docking bays. But Eaton's needed the whole thing because back in the day they were sending out anything you could think of from the catalog to the small towns and farms in the west. You could order anything from a bag of flour, a bag of sugar, clothes, fishing supplies, guns, furniture. You could order a whole house or a barn from the catalog. And they'd ship out all the materials you need. Built such a thing. It was described in great detail to me in my second year doing tours here. The guy said he was 95 years old. He was still living in his catalog house. And then he ordered winning medication. He carried it. Everything arrived in his town right down to the finishing minutes. Floor plans, the instructions, and his crew, which were his friends and family who built that. And I guess they did a good job. And now that brings us to the replica of Fort Gibraltar, which is straight out the front of the boat, past the spaces in the trees. You see a big wall back there. The thing in the foreground is a toboggan slide in the winter, but I'm looking past the spaces in the trees. You can see a bit of the replica of Fort Gibraltar, which replicates the Northwest Company headquarters back in the 1700s. This is like a museum year-round. You can go in there and go from building to building, and then it really comes to life during Festival de Voyageurs, fantastic midwinter cultural festival in the middle of winter. Fantastic time of year here, and it's a lot safer because the river is frozen 3 feet thick on the surface. You can't even fall in it inside. July 22nd, 1968, apparently a roof worker butt out a cigarette in the fresh tar up there. And stepped down for a break. There's no one up there. Nobody noticed the fire spreading in the tar until it hit the bell towers on the left and right of the front wall. Huge ornate bell towers that reached way higher than the cross that's up top in the middle there. They burned and burned until they collapsed in on the roof. The whole roof caved in. And that big circle in the middle of the wall was a stained glass roof until it smashed a bit when the roof came down. It all happened in the middle of the day in front of everybody. So many witnesses to this fire. We still get the odd witnesses on these boat tours. From time to time, I had 3 so far this season. You can wander all around there. It's pretty cool to explore. You can find fluid rails, actual grave in the graveyard out in front of the cathedral. The church built within the ruins in 72 is the 6th one in that site, going back almost 200 years. And then down the street, if you're over there, you got to check out the St. Boniface Museum. Just past the trees, little foreground area. You'll look across the street. There's a Canadian flag flopped over in front of an old log building just ahead of the windows sticking out of the roof there behind the trees. That's the oldest building in the west. It is an old log building completed in 1851. It was the residency of the Grey Nuns or Grey Sisters of Montreal. And it's been the St. Boniface Museum for almost 60 years. It's a fantastic little spot to visit. The Grey Nuns that used to live in there, they're the ones that founded the St. Boniface Hospital. On the outer bed, straight ahead, 6 or 7 buildings today, over 1,000 hospital beds. It began as a log cabin with 4 beds in 1871. It's the oldest hospital in Western Canada. Founded by the Grey Nuns. Replacing the wooden one from 1888 that brought the first train across the Assiniboine River up from Minnesota. And when this was being built, there was a bylaw that all bridges over navigable rivers in the Winnipeg area had to be lift bridges to make way for the big shipping boats, which was very much a Red River thing, not really an Assiniboine River thing. But anyway, big concrete ballast on the upper right assisted a motor-driven lift system. The middle section will lift up the seesaw stop. Check out the gears in the upper right corner. They look brand new to this day. Apparently they finished it in 1908. They lifted it once for testing and public display, and they may never have had to lift it ever again, ladies and gentlemen. But we're glad they made it. It's a fantastic footbridge. You can get up there in about 2 minutes from the dock. You skate over to the winter. And if there's anyone up there right now, you will see clearly that their faces can barely contain their joy. That's what happens when you're up there. Anyway, thank you all so kindly for joining the Splash Dash River Tours on a brisk Thursday? Is it Thursday? Again? Jeez.
All day.
Thursday all day. I hope you all have a beautiful day. Hope you had a fun tour. If you had an extra nice time, I got a little tip jar here. Tips are appreciated. The only obligations we have are these 2 things. So number 1, check out my son's kindergarten picture. It's adorable. Right? See that on the way off the boat. The only important obligation we have is to please remain seated while I crash into this dock as gently as I can. Okay, so until we're securely tied to the dock, sit back and relax. Thanks again for joining Splash Dash River Tours, folks, and have a wonderful day.
Right here. Hey! How you doing? Good.